Now, why would somebody bicycle 25 kilometers just to come to the airport? What other reason than to eat lunch? And if you're curious why I would come to the airport to eat lunch, then stick around and find out. A few years ago, I asked my dad a question that had been on my mind for a while. I said, "Appa, why do we leave Korea to move to the US?" And he just said, "Son, Korea was so poor back then, we had to leave." That was it. Simple. No dramatic story, just survival. Korea today is one of the wealthiest and most popular countries in the world. But in the 1970s, it was a different story. It was still recovering from war. Politically, it was still very unstable. And for most people, life was just harsh. Even though the country had started its big push for economic growth, the everyday person didn't feel that yet. Living conditions, labor conditions, it was all still really tough. I was born in 1974, but I didn't know any better. I was just a little kid, totally ignorant to it all. We were living in Busan, on the campus of a small church. I don't have any memories of that time, but my mom tells me stories. Like how I would ride around everywhere on my little tricycle. I guess things don't really change that much, huh? But then also how my grandmother would chase me around everywhere trying to feed me. And after my baby brother Albert was born, apparently I used to put little bottles over his little thingy to help him pee. But that was all probably because we were all too scared to use those old outhouses back then. And in case you didn't know, an outhouse didn't have a flushing toilet. They were just a hole in the ground that you just went in. No wonder we were peeing in bottles back then. But that era wasn't just unique to me and my family. Back in the 1970s and 80s, many Koreans were emigrating all over the world just trying to find a better life. Between 1962 and 1980, over 750,000 Koreans moved abroad, mostly to the United States, but also to Canada, South America, and Europe. But it wasn't just Koreans. Filipinos, Vietnamese, Mexicans, even Southern Europeans, people everywhere were leaving home in search of something more. So even if you're not Korean, maybe you can still relate. Because this isn't just a Korean story, it's a human one. It just happens that this is mine. As I mentioned in the opening, I'm headed toward the airport. But you might think I'm headed for Incheon Airport, but I'm actually not. Incheon Airport only opened in 2001 and is now considered one of the world's best airports. But prior to Incheon Airport, there was Gimpo Airport, and that was the airport that everyone used before then. Gimpo actually opened in 1939, originally built by the Japanese as a military airfield. It then became Korea's main international airport after the Korean War. Nowadays, it primarily handles domestic flights and some short-haul international flights, like flights out to Tokyo, Osaka, or Shanghai. Now, back in 1977, my dad had left for Korea a little earlier than us. He was starting a master's program at a seminary in the US, and he was able to get a religious visa through a denomination there. So he went first to set everything up. And then, a little while later, my mom, my baby brother, and I followed. My mom still recalls how 3-year-old me was trying to help by pushing this big, heavy immigrant suitcase on wheels. It was probably full of dried anchovies, gochujang, chili paste, gochugaru, chili powder, and thick, fluffy damyo blankets for cold winter nights. The real purpose for my visit to the airport today was nostalgia, not food. Still, 25K is a long ride, so let's grab a little lunch while I'm here. I went for a bowl of hot and spicy sundae-guk, blood sausage soup. Not the best, but it was still pretty good. Now I can imagine how difficult that flight must have been for my mom flying into the States. And I can also imagine the really tough immigration officer upon arrival at JFK. What's the purpose of your visit? How long will you be staying? Do you have any family here? Now my mom barely spoke any English, but somehow she made it through and we finally made it onto American soil. And then we were reunited with my dad. Even though I came all the way out to Gimpo Airport, sadly I got nowhere to fly out to, so may as well head home. And the sun is out and it's actually pretty warm, so I had to take off a layer. And hopefully these biking shorts aren't too short. Spring in Korea, baby. You know, airports might be the most emotional places in the world. It's where people say goodbye, where they reunite, where old lives end and new ones begin. They're not just literal gateways, they're symbolic ones too. When I left Korea in 1977, I left from Gimpo as a little Korean boy named Park Eun-seok. And when I returned again for the first time 8 years later, I came back as an Americanized little boy named Joseph Park. And ever since, I've been going back and forth between those two names, those two identities, trying to figure out who I really am. There are more stories like this coming up in future videos and also in my soon-to-be published book, Who I Am, a memoir of an American Korean in search of identity. Let me ask you something. Where is a place you've traveled to that changed your life? Drop it in the comments below and I'd love to hear your story. And if you like this video and want to see more like it, please like, subscribe, and come ride again with me next time.